Transform your plate. Transform your life.
Okay, let's dive into something incredibly relatable.
Right.
You know that feeling, right? The one where you've had a day, maybe work was wild, or you're just feeling a bit low, or even just utterly bored, and you find yourself kind of automatically reaching for comfort food. That bag of chips, the block of chocolate, the ice cream in the freezer.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a potent impulse, almost like the food is calling your name. And for that moment, that very brief moment, it does feel like it helps, it distracts, it soothes, it gives you something, to do with the discomfort.
Exactly. It's like a temporary fix, isn't it? A quick swipe at the emotional pain.
Yeah.
But then almost inevitably comes the downside. The temporary comfort fades, leaving behind a different kind of discomfort.
Right.
Guilt, maybe shame, a feeling of being out of control, sometimes even physical unease from eating too much or too fast.
And that fresh wave of negative emotion can unfortunately become a trigger itself, pushing you right back towards the very behavior you just regretted. It's a frustrating, often painful cycle, really. Emotion, eating, temporary relief, and then bang, more negative emotion.
It feels like a trap. You know you're doing it, you don't want to do it, but in the moment, it feels almost impossible to resist. It's certainly not about a lack of willpower, which is where so many people get stuck, blaming themselves.
Yeah, it's far more complex than just willpower. It's about deep-seated patterns and coping mechanisms. But what if there was a way to step outside that automatic reaction? A way to approach eating that wasn't about rigid diets or fighting constant battles with cravings, but more about cultivating awareness.
That's precisely the territory we're exploring in this deep dive.
Huh.
We pulled together insights from a few key sources.
Yeah.
A wellness guidance video, a really practical article from Harvard Health, and importantly, perspectives from an Eating Disorders Association. And they all seem to converge on one powerful concept, mindful eating.
Right. Our mission today is to cut through the noise and extract the absolute most practical techniques and core insights from these sources. We want to unpack why we emotionally eat, yes, but then really focus on how mindful eating provides a path forward, a concrete set of tools to help you overcome the hold emotional eating can have and build a genuinely healthier, more relaxed relationship with food.
Okay, so let's start by really dissecting that first piece.
Yeah.
Emotional eating. What's fundamentally happening when we eat for reasons other than, actual physical hunger?
Well, the sources make it pretty clear. Emotional eating is fundamentally a coping strategy. It's using food consciously or sometimes unconsciously to handle feelings or situations that feel difficult, overwhelming, or maybe just uncomfortable. Think stress, sadness, anger, anxiety.
But also things like boredom or loneliness.
Exactly. Boredom, loneliness, or even using food as a reward after a tough day. It covers a lot of ground.
It's like the food becomes a stand-in for dealing with the actual emotion or situation. Instead of processing the anger or figuring out why you're bored, you eat.
Precisely. And this often leads to that characteristic cycle we mentioned earlier. An emotional trigger hits, you experience an urge to eat, you get that fleeting sense of comfort or distraction.
Fleeting is the key word there.
Absolutely. Followed quickly by regret, guilt, or shame, which then feeds the negative emotional state. And the cycle is just ready to repeat itself.
And it's so crucial to understand the difference between this and true physical hunger. Physical hunger is gradual, right? The sources describe it as more of a gentle signal, maybe a rumbling stomach, a dip in energy, a feeling that builds over time.
And critically, when you're physically hungry, most foods will satisfy you. Your body is essentially saying, I need fuel.
Right, fuel, any fuel.
But emotional hunger, that's a very different beast. It tends to come on suddenly, intensely. It often fixates on specific foods, that salty crunch or that sweet, creamy texture. It feels urgent.
The specific craving. And the key differentiator the sources highlight. Emotional hunger is rarely satisfied by the food itself, not truly. You might eat a huge amount of that specific craving food, but the underlying emotion is still there, right? And you're often left feeling uncomfortably full and layered with guilt.
Exactly. Physical hunger gets satisfied. Emotional hunger just gets masked for a moment. That distinction is incredibly powerful once you start noticing it in yourself. And it brings us back to the point that this isn't some kind of moral failing. It's a learned behavior. If you've used food to cope for years, your brain has built a really strong association.
So it's not about being bad or weak.
Not at all. It's about having a powerful ingrained habit that needs to be understood and, well, gently rewired.
Okay, so if emotional eating is the challenge, what is this alternative path the sources point to mindful eating? What does that actually mean in practice?
Mindful eating, at its heart, is basically about bringing full, non-judgmental awareness to the entire experience of eating. It's applying the principles of mindfulness, just paying attention to the present moment without judgment specifically to the act of nourishing your body.
So it's definitely not just shoveling food in while thinking about a million other things, like checking emails or watching TV.
Far from it. It means actively engaging, noticing the vibrant colors on your plate, the distinct aromas rising from the food. It's about paying attention to the textures as you chew, the complex flavors unfolding in your mouth. It's about tuning into your body's physical cues, that first sign of hunger, the subtle shift as you begin to feel satisfied.
And noticing thoughts and emotions, too.
Crucially, yes. Observing the thoughts and emotions that arise before, during, and after you eat. Simply noticing them without getting carried away or judging yourself for having them.
The Harvard article mentions its roots in Buddhist traditions, right? Applying that present moment awareness is something we do multiple times a day.
Exactly. It transforms eating from a potentially mindless, sometimes anxious activity into an opportunity for connection with your food and connection with your body's actual needs. And the stark contrast, as the sources illustrate, is the way so many of us tend to eat today. Rushed, distracted, on the go, in front of screens.
Like that example they use of someone eating a whole sandwich and chips while working at their computer and then barely remembering the experience afterward.
Precisely that scenario. You finish the meal, maybe feeling overly full, but you didn't actually experience it. And that distracted way of eating isn't just less enjoyable, it actively sabotages your body's natural ability to regulate intake.
Which brings us to the crucial question: why does mindful eating work? How does simply paying attention help us break free from those emotional eating patterns and maybe stop overeating?
Well, there's a fascinating physiological component the sources delve into. It relates to the mind-gut connection and the way your body signals fullness or satiety. Eating involves complex signals between your digestive system and your brain.
And these signals aren't instantaneous. I think I've heard this before.
Not at all. That's the key. The sources highlight that it takes approximately 20 minutes for your brain to fully register that signal that you're becoming full, that you've reached satiety.
20 minutes.
Ah.
So if you eat a whole meal in, say, 5 or 10 minutes.
You've likely finished eating, potentially consumed more food than your body needed before the brain has even received the, hey, I'm getting full message. Mindful eating helps by, quite simply, forcing you to slow down. By taking your time, chewing thoroughly, pausing, you give those vital satiety signals time to travel from your gut to your brain.
Allowing you to recognize comfortable fullness as you're eating, rather than realizing 15 minutes later, oh, I ate way too much.
Exactly. That alone is huge, just giving your body time to catch up. But it also helps with the emotional side, right? Tuning into what's really going on.
Right, yeah. How does it help there?
Well, mindfulness helps you pause and investigate the real driver behind the urge to eat. You start asking, is this a physical need for fuel? Or is this feeling actually driven by anxiety or boredom or stress? By bringing that non-judgmental awareness, you create space to identify the true source.
And this leads to perhaps the most powerful tool mentioned in the sources, creating that moment of choice.
That moment of choice is transformative, truly. In the typical emotional eating cycle, an emotion triggers an immediate, almost automatic reaction you reach for food. There's no conscious thought in between. Mindful eating and the awareness it cultivates inserts a pause. It creates a space between the urge and the action.
A tiny window where you get to decide, okay, hold on, this is really what I need right now. Is eating the most helpful response to this feeling?
Exactly. It's about disengaging the autopilot. By simply becoming aware of the urge as an urge rather than an unavoidable command, you reclaim your agency. You introduce the possibility of choosing a different response, maybe one that actually addresses the underlying emotion or need, rather than just temporarily burying it in food.
That shift from automatic reaction to conscious choice sounds fundamental to overcoming emotional eating patterns.
It really is.
Okay, that moment of choice feels like the key to unlocking the whole thing. But how do you actually build this? It sounds great in theory, but what are the practical steps the sources lay out for mastering mindful eating day to day?
Right. This is where the rubber meets the road, and the sources offer very concrete, actionable steps you can start incorporating pretty much immediately. They emphasize it's a practice, though, not some sudden transformation.
So baby steps are okay.
Good. More than okay, they're essential. The first practical step is fundamental. Tuning into your body's signals of hunger and fullness. Before you even pick up your fork, just pause. Check in with your body. Ask yourself, how hungry am I right now?
Like using a scale or something.
Yes, exactly. The sources suggest using a simple scale, say 1 to 10, where 1 is absolutely starving, maybe feeling faint, and 10 is painfully stuffed, like after Thanksgiving dinner. Most of us tend to wait until we're ravenous, maybe a 1 or 2, before eating, which makes mindful choices way harder, or we eat until we're well past comfortable, an 8, 9, or 10.
Okay, so the goal isn't to get to a 1 or eat until a 10.
Precisely. The aim is to try and start eating when you're lightly hungry, maybe a 3 or 4 on the scale. And critically, aim to stop when you're comfortably satisfied, not uncomfortably full. Nourishing it appropriately, rather than waiting until you're desperate or pushing way past fullness.
Okay, so check in before you start, and keep checking in as you go to recognize satisfaction. What's the next step?
Slowing down and savoring. This is just non-negotiable if you want to activate those satiety signals we talked about and actually enjoy your food more. Put your utensils down between bites, take smaller bites.
And chewing. I've heard the 2x number of times rule. Is that really a thing?
Yeah, the sources do mention chewing thoroughly. Some traditional advice like Horace Fletcher back in the day maybe went a bit overboard, suggesting hundreds of chews, as the Harvard article notes. But the core idea is solid.
Okay, so maybe not hundreds.
Probably not hundreds, but chew enough so the food is easy to swallow and you can really taste it. Aiming for, say, at least 20, 30 times per bite for solids can be a good guideline just to ensure you're present and giving your digestive system a head start. It makes a massive difference to enjoyment and pacing.
Putting a fork down between bites.
Yeah.
That feels so counterintuitive when you're used to rushing.
It absolutely does. And it takes conscious effort at first.
Right.
But it physically slows you down, creating that space for awareness. And alongside slowing down, you really need to try and eliminate distractions. This is a huge one in our modern life.
Oh, tell me about it. Eating lunch while scrolling through headlines, dinner in front of the TV. Guilty as charged sometimes.
Exactly that. The sources are pretty adamant. Try to make your meal a primary activity, not something happening in the background while you do something else. Turn off the TV, put your phone away, maybe even in another room. Close the laptop. Eat at a table if possible. When your attention is elsewhere, you are almost guaranteed to miss your body's subtle cues about hunger and fullness. It's almost impossible not to overeat when you're truly distracted.
So give the meal your full, undivided attention. It sounds simple, but it's probably one of the hardest for many people to actually implement.
It requires intention, for sure. Another powerful technique is engaging all your senses. Mindful eating isn't just about taste, you know. Before you even take a bite, pause and really look at your food. Notice the colors, the arrangement on the plate. Inhale its aroma.
No, okay.
Yes. Then when you do take a bite, pay attention to the textures. Is it crunchy, smooth, soft? Listen to the sounds of chewing.
Like the apple example from the Harvard article, just focusing on the sensory experience of one single bite.
Yes. That's a great exercise. Closing your eyes and just focusing on the taste, texture, sound as you bite and chew that apple slice. It makes the experience so much richer, more satisfying, and it grounds you in the present moment with your food. It turns eating into an actual experience, not just, consumption.
Okay, we've talked about tuning into the body and the food itself. What about those emotional triggers we mentioned? How do we identify those practically, in the moment?
This is where you start connecting the eating behavior back to the underlying feelings. The sources suggest some simple practices. One useful method is the HALT check-in. Before you grab food, especially if you suspect you might not be physically hungry, just ask yourself, am I feeling hungry physically, angry, lonely, or tired?
Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Simple, but potentially really effective.
It gives you a quick framework to check in with your emotional state. You can also just ask yourself that simple, powerful question before opening the fridge or pantry, am I really hungry right now? Just that pause and question can shift you out of autopilot.
And once you identify that it might be anger or boredom driving the urge, not physical hunger, what then?
That leads to the next critical step. Create a pause and choose your response. When that emotional craving hits that sudden, intense urge for a specific food, your ingrained habit is probably to immediately go get it. The practice here is to consciously insert a pause. Make it non-negotiable, even if it feels hard at first.
How long of a pause are we talking? Like an hour?
No, not necessarily that long. Even just 5 or 10 minutes can be enough to make a difference. Step away from the kitchen. Take 3 slow, deep breaths. Go for a very short walk around the block or even just around the room. Listen to one song, text a friend, do something, anything for that short period that isn't eating.
And the magic happens in that pause. Does the craving just disappear?
Well, maybe not disappear entirely, but often the intensity of the craving, which feels so overwhelming in the moment, will significantly lessen when you don't respond to it instantly. That pause creates the space for the moment of choice we discuss. It allows you to ask, okay, I feel angry, bored, tired. What do I actually need right now?
Ah, right. So you might realize you need rest or connection or movement.
Exactly. Or maybe just to sit with the feeling for a bit, or process the emotion directly, things food can't truly provide. It empowers you to choose a response that's actually aligned with your true need in that moment, rather than just the default food response.
That reframes the whole thing. It's not about denying the feeling or the urge, but about acknowledging it and choosing a different, maybe more helpful path. And the final practical step sounds like maybe the most compassionate one.
Absolutely, and maybe the most important for long-term success. Practice self-compassion, not perfection. Mindful eating is a practice. It's a journey, not a destination where you suddenly do it perfectly all the time. You will have slips. There will be meals where you're distracted, times you eat too fast, moments you give in to an emotional urge. That's just human.
And the old pattern is the guilt and self-criticism that follows.
Right. The sources really emphasize that falling back into self-judgment is counterproductive and often just fuels the cycle of emotional eating again. Instead, when you notice a slick, try to acknowledge it without judgment. Just observe, okay, I ate that whole bag while watching TV, noticing that. Don't beat yourself up.
Just notice and move on.
Notice, maybe learn from it, perhaps note what the trigger was or the circumstances, and then gently, kindly return to the practice at your next meal or snack. Every single eating occasion is a fresh opportunity to choose awareness.
That feels incredibly liberating. It's not about being a perfect mindful eater overnight, but about continuously coming back to the practice with kindness towards yourself.
Exactly. It shifts the focus from strict rules and potential failure to ongoing learning and self-care. And as you integrate these practices over time, the sources suggest some really wonderful potential outcomes. People often find they genuinely enjoy their food more because they're actually tasting it, experiencing it.
I'm feeling satisfied with less food
You know,
because those satiety signals are being heard.
That's often reported, yes. Feeling satisfied with less. Moving towards a more intuitive relationship with food overall. It becomes less about external rules and more about tuning into your body's internal wisdom. It can also lead to improved digestion for some, and generally cultivating a much more relaxed, peaceful relationship with eating.
It sounds like genuine food freedom rather than being trapped by cravings or guilt.
That's a great way to put it. And the sources do mention some research supporting this, don't they?
Yeah. What did they say about that?
Well, the Harvard article, for instance, references studies, including one funded by the NIH that focus specifically on binge eating. It suggests that mindful eating strategies might be a helpful component in treating binge eating and can help individuals experience less sense of struggle around controlling their eating behavior.
Which sounds very promising for those specific challenges.
It does. However, and this is really crucial to underline, as our sources do, particularly the information drawing from the Eating Disorders Association, while these are valuable tools for general wellness and improving one's relationship with food for many people, they are absolutely not a substitute for professional medical or psychological care.
Okay, that's important. So if someone is struggling with a diagnosed eating disorder or experiences severe disordered eating patterns, this deep dive is not offering clinical treatment or advice.
Correct. The information here is purely for educational purposes, based on the general wellness sources we looked at. Eating disorders are serious mental health conditions. They require the expertise and support of qualified healthcare professionals, doctors, therapists, registered dietitians specializing in eating disorders. If you are struggling, please reach out for that professional help.
That's a critical point to make crystal clear. These mindful eating practices are powerful tools for many for everyday challenges, but they exist within a broader spectrum of health and absolutely require professional support when dealing with clinical conditions.
Absolutely. It's about providing helpful strategies for common eating challenges and patterns like emotional eating, while completely respecting the serious nature of eating disorders and the essential need for specialized care.
Okay, so to recap our deep dive today, we've shown a light on that common pattern of emotional eating and its, let's face it, frustrating cycle. We've defined mindful eating as bringing that non-judgmental awareness to the whole eating experience. We've seen why it works, from the biology of that 20-minute satiety signal to the psychology of creating that essential moment of choice.
And we've walked through those really practical steps, tuning into hunger and fullness, using maybe a scale, slowing down and savoring, eliminating distractions, a big one,
Yeah.
engaging all your senses.
Right, and identifying triggers with tools like HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Plus, intentionally creating that pause before acting on urges and, maybe most importantly, embracing self-compassion throughout the whole process.
It really is about shifting from that autopilot consumption to more conscious nourishment. It's a practice of presence, connection, and actually a powerful form of self-care embedded in the simple act of eating every day.
It's about transforming your relationship, not just with food, but really with how you respond to your own emotions and needs, isn't it?
Choosing awareness over automatic reaction, that's the core of it.
So here's a little thought for you to carry forward and maybe experiment with this week, building on what we've discussed. Think about one specific moment or trigger where you often find yourself reaching for food emotionally. Perhaps it's that feeling of overwhelm when you first get home from work, or maybe the boredom on a quiet evening.
Or maybe choose just one mindful eating technique we talked about, maybe the easiest one that resonated with you. Could you commit to just putting your fork down between the first few bites at dinner tonight? Or the next time you feel that non-physical urge to eat, could you simply try creating that 5-minute pause before deciding what to do?
How might simply adding that small intentional pause, or focusing on just one sense with your food, maybe just the smell or the look of it, change your next meal experience? What new awareness might it bring?
Give yourself permission to try it out, maybe just once, and just see what you discover. You might